All right, listeners, welcome to episode 13 of the Real Take Tennis podcast. Lucky number 13. It's been a little bit of a break for us. We've been traveling all over the world, really just trying to understand and get deeper into the tennis space. And when I say travel all over the world, we've really just been to Fairfield in Northern California. Because
It's
as we'll
okay
get
if you
into
don't know where that is, guys.
yeah, neither did we until we typed it in on the map. But as we'll get into a little bit later, the road to the top goes through Fairfield, so you got to have that on your map. But it's been a good couple of weeks. A lot of good tournaments, a lot of good stuff happening. We're taping this on the heels of Shanghai and the Asia Swing, and there's still another Masters 1000 tournament coming up later in the year. So a lot of good tennis. But yeah, anything coming to the top of your mind right now?
No, I think we got to kick things off with Fairfield.
All right, cool, awesome. So Fairfield. So essentially, Vasil and Dennis were in the finals of Fairfield, and so of course, the boys had to show up and support. Very interesting surroundings. I think like both of us, had the same opinion that we felt like we were about to play like a boys 14 courtside junior championship and just get waxed by by one of the big dogs. I felt low key a little depressed because I was like, dude, this is taking place at a community college, and you'd expect some of the best players in the world to have like a little grander stage to be able to compete. But here we are, where we had to pass through the gym in order to get to the bathroom of the community college, where classrooms were used as the umpires chilling area, and I mean, it was borderline. Yeah, it was borderline disrespectful. But it was the courts were sick, and it was good to be able to watch the guys because it was it was still a really good level of competition. Sad they couldn't get it out with the W, but it was a good tournament for them.
Yeah, Reese and Evan played super well in the finals. I will say that the Fairfield tournament does do a good job of kind of working what they've got. Obviously,
Yeah,
the previous week was Tiburon, which was apparently a lot. Obviously, that's a nicer venue.
yeah.
Um, but to reiterate your point, I definitely the vibes on the drive up to Fairfield were basically I was about to get triple crowned and then have a conversation with my dad in the car right after about how I need to stop hitting the ball in the middle of the court.
Yeah, no, it was extremely bad. And on that note, when we were after in between the first and second set, Kiko was just like on the other side, right? And we were just like, "Yo, why'd you take you so long to go to the bathroom?" He's like, "Oh, my dad was telling me to like give Vasil some advice because he wasn't doing it." So even for the players, they were getting similar treatment too.
And speaking of advice, I think we can dive straight into the match and kind of the
Yeah,
strategy and what Reese and Evan did really well,
yeah,
um, and kind of what we noticed in general about that high level of doubles.
yeah,
I think one thing in particular was, uh, uh, the formations and serve location. I think those were two themes that we really took away from this.
yeah. Yeah, 100%, right? And like I think to elaborate on that is specifically we saw but everyone on the court had a much better backhand return than their forehand return.
As we've
And
been saying for a long time.
yeah, as we've been saying for a long time, and as this has been clear, right? And I mean, it's pretty clear why, because like these guys can serve so well. It's just easier to block the pace and use two hands for stability and control, as opposed to just like having that one-handed forehand, right? And so we thought that Vasil and Dennis should have done maybe a little bit more eye to the forehand, like eye formation, and then serve to the forehand because that cuts off that I mean, like A, that puts more pressure on their return, but also B, if it goes like right down the middle, which we kind of expect on the ad side or on the do side for Evan because he's a lefty, the ball's right there to cut off, right? And so that was a formation we unfortunately didn't see too many times, but I mean, our hypothesis was validated when Kiko and Vasil's dad was like, "Yeah, I said the exact same thing, right?" And so yeah, that was good.
Yeah, and then to elaborate on the formations, I think um, one thing we noticed is it's okay to a lot of times you need to throw in a formation that is higher risk
Yeah.
just to throw off your opponent's rhythm, even if you lose that point or the next point in the short term, because
Yeah.
what you're doing is setting up success for the following points thereafter, right? So a lot of times when you're doing eye and same side and things like that, you're getting in your opponent's head, right? You're playing poker with your opponents about where you're going to move, about where they need to hit the next ball, and that extra thought process, I think, creates in these types of fast-paced situations, I think it creates the doubt that a lot of times will generate errors or easy put away balls at net.
Yeah, exactly. And that's something we even saw in the return, right? Like Vasil hit like a really ripped like a really like a second serve. Vasil ripped a return that went long or went out, like something happened, right? But that's still a great rip because it puts a lot of pressure, and that's the type of ball that's only going to go in, right? Like it's not like he's going to miss that more often than he's going to make it. And so that puts a lot of pressure on the opponent's second serve, and they'll know that, right? And that gets the thought process in the chess match started of, okay, now I need to make higher first serves. Like, okay, now it gives your opponent basically something to think about when he's hitting that second serve, especially if he knows that you're going to put so much pressure on it.
100%. Yeah, and I think one thing that Reese and Evan did really well was on the second serves, continue to use varied
Yeah.
formations, right? Instead of
Yep.
reverting back to the traditional doubles stance, they
Yeah.
would continue to push for an eye and give
Yeah.
you an on the T side, maybe an eye right, you know, uh, just to keep the other team guessing a little bit.
Yeah, definitely. And it was impressive because I mean, they got broken what on the very first game or the second service game, basically, and they were down like
I think they
three
were down
two.
4-2, yeah, or
Yeah,
3-2, yeah.
yeah, exactly right. And no panic, just continued going about their business and got the break back pretty much like either the next game or the game after, right? And so I mean, they've had a lot of success this year, as we've seen, as we were looking before we jumped on, and they are also setting the record for being one of the most high quality grinders up there with Alex DeMinor, who, as we mentioned, took an Uber from Eastbourne to London,
Hypothetically.
hypothetically.
Why don't you tell the listeners about their mileage over the last, let's say, month?
Yeah, we haven't like officially put this we haven't officially put like a tracker on the total number of miles that they've done over the past like month, but before this so before the Challenger swing in the States, they were in China. From China they went to Fairfield and Columbus, I believe, and then after that after they won Fairfield, they went to Europe, and
The
after
same
that
night.
or the same night. And then after that, they're going to the Challenger in France. So last week around this time, we were watching them win the Fairfield Challenger. This time, right now, they are in Europe. And so they've gone from east to west, back to east in the span of like 2 weeks, 3 weeks.
Around the world and back. And what's really
Seriously.
cool is they're starting to get some good wins. They
Yeah.
just got to the quarters in European Open. I believe that's in Antwerp. So
Yep.
uh, lost to a decent team.
Yeah.
I think we might see them in some slams pretty soon. They're definitely knocking on the door.
Yeah, for sure. And these are the types of results. Like anytime you win these types of challengers, right? Like uh you're gonna get noticed by the federation. You're gonna have opportunities to like compete in, either local or in US tournaments or like eventually the US Open, right? And it's I think that's like the other point that even though like the Grand Slams are done, this like back half of this or like these last like 3 months, there's still a lot of really good tennis being played for like the guys who aren't like, in the top 75 or top 100. There's still like a lot of opportunities for them to get points and work the base for next year, right? And that
Yep.
kind of gives meaning to the tournaments that we're seeing now, and which is why like, more people should tune in and why these results are also important.
Yeah, and while the ATP Tour is winding down, the Challenger Tour actually kind of ramps up because of that
Yeah.
road to Australia right now. So,
Yep.
I think people as soon, I mean, we learned this from Basio, right? As soon as you start getting in the slams, it is a positive feedback loop where
Yep.
you just need to win a point and then or win a match, and the number of points you get are exponentially more than you'd get from a challenger. And then once you get that breakthrough, I think it seems to be a lot easier.
Yep. 100%.
One thing I will say about the match we watched between Reese and Evan against Vasil and Dennis was I do think that if Vasil and Dennis consolidated that break in the first set, it could have been a pretty different match. Um, we pretty much every match in doubles these days goes to three and goes to that 10-point tiebreaker shootout.
Yeah.
Um, I think, man, they were right there,
Yeah.
just a break here. I mean, literally, I would say the first set was determined by unfortunately a slightly shanked volley by Dennis at net when he had an opportunity to put one away.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think it was at 30 all at 5-6. And Reese and Evan were able to break that game and then I think run away with the second.
Yeah, no, like 100%. And it also felt like there were a lot of I don't think Dennis and Lucille played as well as they like normally have because there was like a lot of shank balls. There was a lot of like missed balls. Like I remember Vasile missing some swing backhand balls, which I've never ever really seen him miss. Right, and so tough day, especially when you're playing like two guys as like Evan and Reese who are as solid as they are and put as much pressure on you. So uh, learning lesson, and we'll be talking to our boy as he makes his way through Stockholm because he's got some tournaments upcoming too.
Yep.
Cool. Maybe we just like transition real quick to talking about like what we've seen from like the Asia swing and just tournaments in general over the past like 2 months or a month or so. Like I think we've made it a point to identify like a lot of we made it a point to identify guys that we are quite high on as having like really high potential, and these are guys who have stirred the chat up quite a bit in terms of having high potential, but others not recognizing their talents. But it's been a good month for like Americans in general, I would say, right? Like Sebastian Corda, who I'm personally very high on, has had like a really good swing. Like I believe he reached the finals of Astana, losing to Manarino, and then he had a really good run in Shanghai as well, beating Ben Shelton. And so, I mean, that's a massive that's a massive period of results, especially like after the start of the year, right? Getting to the quarters and beating Medvedev in Australia. So, guy I'm personally very high on, and obviously I'll let you talk about Ben.
Yeah, before I talk about Ben, I just wanted to say it's pretty ironic how our first half of the year all league ATP
Yeah,
has completely shat the bed in the second half for the most part, right? We said Rune was the best. Jerry
yeah,
was playing really well on the clay courts.
yeah,
Um, and kind of a new crop of players has come up, and it just shows again this theme of how long this calendar year is and how hard
yeah,
it is to sustain level without getting injured for so long.
yeah. No, for sure. And I mean, Jerry is still having good results, and his still like I'm still seeing him make deep runs. After watching him play D Minor, I
Yeah, we
just
just
can't.
can't take him seriously.
Yeah, I just can't put him on my list as like being an all ATP. That's we reserve those for the best of the best. And when the ball comes back down the middle like 15 times, it might be better to not just slap it as hard as you can on the 16th one. So he's off the list for now. But yeah, I think like maybe a good point to start is like what do you attribute, let's say, like Ben's recent kind of like form and consistency too. I mean, as we're taking this on the heels of him reaching his first ATP final after being down 7-6, 5-2 to Marcos Giron, who also has had a good couple of
Second half
months.
of the
And
year. Yep.
yeah, and like now I think it's like 11 out of 14 matches won. That puts him at, I think, probably just a little bit under 500 or at 500, or like right around that point for the year, which is great, right? I mean, he's clearly building the momentum off the US Open. And this is something we said, right? Like it's only a matter of time before he finds a consistency. We can't give him like all ATP right now just because of like his lacking consistency, but he's balling out right now.
Yeah, so one thing I don't understand is when people don't understand momentum and
Yeah,
trajectories. So
yeah,
Ben Shelton, four-star freshman year of high school.
yeah,
All right, he's outside the top 100 in the nation on TR. He's a blue chip his senior year of high school. Okay, so he moved 100 spots in the country. Redshirt freshman year of college. NCAA singles champion junior year of college. So he literally went from unranked redshirt sitting on the bench to winning the highest level of American tennis. Top 500 June 2022, top 100 November 2022, top 50 January 2023, top 20 September 2023, and he's in the finals of a tournament right now. So,
Quick point before you
yep,
continue. I was just gonna say, and while he's on the bench at Florida, a reminder that his dad is the coach. So
yep,
any like, it's not like his dad could have had all the excuse to be like, oh, I'm gonna put my kid in the starting lineup.
yep.
He himself is like, no, my son's not good enough. I'm no nepotism here. He's got to earn it.
And it's one thing to improve to that degree in rankings, but it's another thing to improve to that degree in mindset and actual play style. This is a guy who has, I mean, we literally saw him improve against Djokovic during the match, right? He like learned how to grind during that match. And nearly, got a break off Djokovic, nearly took the third set. Um, so, you know, I, I just think he's over the last year shown so much improvement. And he's worked on his slice, he's worked on his volleys, he's added in new elements of his game, like the serve and volley. I mean, his serve just keeps getting better, and it's still, as much as people say servers are a lot of times one dimensional, I still think people are having a lot of trouble reading his serve, right? And the reality is, when you put that much kick on the ball on the second serve, it doesn't matter if your opponent knows where it's going, it is going to be
Yep.
uncomfortable. So he's just got his ground strokes have gotten way more reliable. I mean, his forehand is a straight up cannon. Um, there's not much negative to be said. I mean, this is a guy who I still will, along with Corda and a few of the other Americans, I would definitely put him as a potential slam winner if he continues on this trajectory.
Yeah, I mean I agree with everything you said, but I think the thing that's caught my eye is like if we look at two Ben at the Australian Open, right? I think the thing that his forehand and his serve were good even then. To me, his backhand has improved considerably.
Yep.
I feel like he was very flat with his backhand in Australia and just like trying to hit through it. He's putting a lot more spin on the ball and
Yep.
he's like able, it's like as that grinding aspect you're talking about, right? He's like learning how to like work the point a little bit better. And I mean, even just today, like the highlights that we saw that I was watching with him and Giron, like there were some long rallies, right? And like
Yep.
he's not going, he can, I mean, yeah, he can blow Marcos off the court potentially, but he's working the point. He's like trying to find ways to get rhythm and get consistency to find those like opportunities, right?
And his fitness is also, it was hard to imagine his fitness improving, but I feel like this
Yeah,
guy has gotten even quicker, for example,
quicker.
right? We always
Yeah,
knew he was never going to cramp. He's from Florida. He
yeah,
has that ability to grind, but I think he's gotten quicker off the first step. I think he was actually a little bit slow in Australia off the first step. Obviously, he's a freak
yeah,
athlete and he can move once he's in motion very
yeah,
quickly. But man, his first step has improved. And to your point about the backhand, I think it starts with technique, right? He's got a
yeah,
really fundamental medicine ball
yeah,
backhand swing where both hands work
yeah.
together really, really well. And he does a great job of when he's on the run, open stance backhand will just lace it up the middle, give you no angles. I think that's shockingly one of his most important shots of the last couple months.
Yeah, definitely. And this was also great to like we were the ATP put out this video of Brian Shelton, Ben's coach and dad, like talking to Ben about he's got a very like his dad clearly knows what he's talking about. He's got like a very good support system around
Yep.
him where he's just able to like focus on the process, right? And obviously like Brian having been through like the pro grind itself knows that it takes time to build this, right? And I think for me it's just like when you have a guy who has a clear weapon in the serve and in the forehand, who's consistent, who's clearly willing to put the effort in to become like better each and every day, it's only a matter of time before those like baby steps or baby like basically interest keeps like adding up, right? And
Yep.
results in like a good start.
And when we say the road to the top goes through Fairfield, Ben Shelton is a case in point, right? Because
Yep,
he was in this, he
definitely.
lost in the semifinals of Fairfield last year, and now
Yep,
look at where he is. So
yep.
we're definitely hopeful about the guys we've seen at that tournament.
Yeah, definitely. And that, I mean, that's all like this guy hasn't had has had like a more inconsistent road, but Taylor Fritz played and won Fairfield Challenger only like a couple years ago, right? Basically, and so like we were half joking when we said the road to the top goes through Fairfield, but also a part not, right? Like
Yep.
because you have to like win at this level and like establish like these types of frameworks and patterns that will help you get to that next level.
Yeah, and I think Mackey won in
Yeah,
Fairfield, right? Maybe
yeah,
16, and then I think he won doubles the next year.
yes,
So
I believe that is
definitely
correct.
some solid Americans have come through that route.
Yep. Any other guys who you've seen, who we've talked about maybe as having potential that have come to your mind over this like kind of back half of the year or like
Yeah,
past couple months?
I do want to call out Hurkacz obviously for
Yeah.
winning Shanghai. I
Yep.
still think he I mean, unbelievable serve, huge weapons,
Yeah.
moves like a panther for a guy
Yeah.
his size.
Yeah.
I still think the forehand has some holes in it. It's a
Yeah.
little technically, and we've talked about this, you don't have to hit the textbook forehand, but I think
Yeah.
there are some holes where it can break down, and it has in
Yeah.
the past.
Yeah.
Um, Great win against Rublev, held his nerve. Um, I'm just going to call him out for the recent result. I still don't necessarily see him as having as much potential per se as a Rublev or, even when we think about some of the other guys who've been doing really good in this kind of hard court Asia swing, Grigor, um, you know, I definitely like the way those guys have been playing and their solid results.
Yeah, Hurkacz to me has always been a very, very intriguing player because I mean he's like won the Masters 1000, right? And I believe he won in Miami against Yannick. Like he's a multiple time Masters 1000 champion, but I've always noticed that at Grand Slams, he has not like he's lost a lot earlier than I think he should have, right? And he made the semifinals that year that he beat Roger. Uh but even like this year, I saw him play Jack Draper, right? And I mean, he might have been struggling physically, but I think he plays like a really long season because I always find that during those like Grand Slam tournaments, he's
Mm.
always like having really, really long matches and something happens where he's not able to like put together deep runs.
Do you think he could manage his schedule maybe a little bit better if he wants to make a push at the slams?
For sure. I think he could manage his schedule like a little bit, like a lot better. I also think, I mean, we saw this like even as simple as like last week. He won Shanghai and he immediately played Japan. I think that's like
That's a
borderline,
mistake. Yeah.
that's borderline irresponsible because like you gain nothing by playing Japan. Like at this point, like unless you're trying to make a push for Turin, which in
In
which
his
case like
case, yeah, that is the
yeah,
case. Yep.
maybe like that makes sense, but I just think it's gonna that like that type of winning Shanghai and then losing first round is more, especially like playing a three setter against Zhu Zhang, who he just beat, like that does more of a toll on your body than
Right. Yeah.
than not. So
I do think unfortunately, he's in a situation where he has to play this much to get into
yeah,
Turin. But to your
yeah,
point, what's he going to do when he reaches Turin and he's on E
yeah,
at the end of his
yep,
tank for the
yep,
year?
yep,
Um, So yeah, it's tough to say. I definitely respect the push. I think his fitness is really good. I think he
yeah,
can handle it, but yeah, there's only so much concentration, right? We have in a
yeah,
day, a week, a month, a year,
yeah.
and we saw that kind of take its toll this week.
Yeah, but another guy who we're high on as obviously being a great dude, like Rublev, very nice people. Like that they're as good as they are. They seem like they're not dicks. They're guys who like love the game and like play hard and all that, right? And so
To that
I'm a
point,
fan of
though,
them.
to that point, I think Rublev does have a killer instinct. I do think
Yeah.
Hubie, I would
Oh yeah.
put him in the same category a little bit more as Casper Ruud, where you can
Yeah.
tell he's really nice. I don't know if he definitely has a different level in the Masters and 500s, but in
Yeah.
the slams over 5 sets, I just feel like he's just too nice. You can see it
Yeah.
on his face. It's
Yeah.
intangible. I don't really know how
Yeah.
to describe it, but he just he doesn't want it as I mean, Rublev is fucking smashing his racket after the second point of the match.
Yeah, and so it's funny. I realize like different people will show that different ways. I don't think he needs to be like smashing his racket or uh you know voluntarily demonstrating that level of anger. But I think your point, which I agree with, is like there's like a certain aura around Hubie that he's just like he's kind of just there. He's not like there's no like positive energy or something like that that signals to me like, oh shit, this guy's like here, and he's not like he's going for the kill basically, right? Like
Right.
I don't get that kind of signal from him, and maybe that's just ours like fault for maybe we needed to like check him out a little more. But I mean I've seen him play live multiple times this year,
Right.
right? And you have too,
Yeah,
right?
we
And
saw
so
him play Tommy in Indian Wells.
exactly, and so it's the grind of the season, and maybe that's part of it. But we'll see him later in Paris, so we'll see how he does there. Um,
Yeah,
Speaking of people who, yeah, go for it.
I was just gonna say, I think that's a good segue into who we think is gonna make Turin. I don't know if that's
Yeah,
exactly where you were going.
no, I wasn't. I was gonna talk about people who haven't had big time wins and go to
Oh,
our.
let's do that first.
Okay. All right, cool. So speaking of guys who haven't had big wins and have kind of, continued to struggle, our boy Felix.
Oh my God.
So you know what? I want to be like to his credit, he did put together two wins in Japan, and we'll give him credit for that. But just another uh tough tournament for him in what continues to be a tough season. The ball is still being hit really heavy and you know down the middle slash cross court, but
With no
that's
spin or
not.
no variety.
Yeah, no, the slices are not to be found. I mean honestly, losing to Marcos 1-4 when you're 6'4" and have like a pretty good serve, that's tough. So hopefully he finds a way to put it together because he's still athletically like has so much potential, right? But he's clearly struggling, and uh I think there's no need to beat around the bush on this one. I think we've talked about like the various different ways we think he can add to his game, right? Like slices, coming to net, standing inside the baseline, right? Even throwing, you don't even have to throw in like flat balls down the middle. Throw up the high moon ball every now and then, right? As a way to disrupt the rhythm. And I haven't seen that. So maybe that's those are ways he needs to try and, continue to get into the matches.
Yeah, and just for context about how much he's struggled this year, right? The last
Yeah.
time he strung together two matches in a row was Indian Wells. I had to scroll all the way down to March in his activity. After Indian Wells, he won a match in Miami, and then he just had a series of first round losses. Lost in
Jesus.
Madrid, lost in Rome, lost in the second round in France, lost first round in French Open, lost first round in Wimbledon to Michael Mmoh on grass. Wow, that's brutal. Lost to
That's a tough
Watanuki
one.
first round, lost to Max Purcell first round, lost to Manarino second round in Cincinnati, lost to Mackey first round in the US Open, lost to Gael in the Laver Cup, lost to Holger Rune in Beijing, lost to Vucevic in Shanghai. Holy shit,
Jesus
man.
Christ.
That's tough to see. I mean, miraculously, he's 15 and 17 on the year. I think he had a decent start. Um, got a couple wins in the Aussie Open, but my God, that's got to be disheartening.
I think like I'm not. I don't even know mentally what that does to you when you know that you've lost at like in the first round in like every tournament basically almost this year, right? And like Ben, that happened for a period of time, but at least he's turned it around and he's had the highs of reaching the
Yep.
semis, right? And for a player who has, I mean, everyone needs that type of confidence. As much as we talk about like play it one match at a time, don't let the past results in fact influence the next ones. Like that's brutal, and it's
I
tough
mean,
to see.
the only good news I think for him right now is that he has like no points to defend
Yeah,
basically next year. So
yeah,
clean slate. I think honestly, we know he's not going to make Turin, so
yeah,
take some time this offseason and really like work on the tools a little bit, work on the mentality.
yeah,
Come back to the Australian Open as much of a different player as possible. Because at this point, I mean, I'm not going to say he doesn't have anything to lose, but I mean, if he could easily move outside the top 50 pretty soon.
yeah. Honestly, I think a good idea, a good next step is just like go play some challengers. Like you're not been you're not
Wow.
You're not above. He's not above that.
Interesting.
I mean, we saw this like post Indian Wells, right? We saw like Matteo Berrettini just like
Yep.
go and play like Phoenix Challenger right after Indian Wells, right? Like
Yep.
you're not above it, especially
I
if you
think
knew
George played that as well, right?
exactly. Yeah, yeah, something like that, right? And so like if like big name guys as well like are also have also played like challengers throughout the year, you're not above it. Go practice the fundamentals, make sure that they're working and get some confidence, right? Because it's not like, as we've seen, the challengers are no joke. Like you win
Yep.
a challenger, that's a big time, that's a good result too.
And I don't want to lump Felix with in the same category as Yannick Sinner because I think there is a different talent
Yeah,
level. But
yeah,
to me, there's this central theme that runs through both of them to a degree, which is I feel like Felix was able to bully people through the
yes,
juniors and
yeah,
just beat them with his heavy spin and beat them with his game style and not really have to win super tight matches or gut through or grit through while playing at 25% or 30% or change his game style or maybe hurt his left wrist and learn how to like just play with a backhand slice the whole time.
yeah,
He's just I mean you can tell he has been able to dominate with his game style and that's why it's so hard for that mentality shift.
yeah,
And like you said, I mean like we've talked about with Murray too, right? In order for him to kind of win slams, he had to change his instincts almost, and that's not an easy thing to do. It's going to start to your point, maybe at the lower levels or in the off season.
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, speaking of which, Murray's won what, three Grand Slams?
Yep,
Like
Olympic
he played
gold.
challenger. Yeah, multiple gold, reached like the Aussie Open like 10 times, the Aussie Open final 10 times. He played challengers this year too. If he can do it, so can you. Like it's
Yep,
not we can start there. Cool. We'll maybe transition over to you want to say the turn stuff for last or
sure.
this caught my eye. We saw Fed in Shanghai, and one of the things I was listening to him just talking about, life after the tour, and I mean we've seen him a couple times already this year, just making appearance on at various tournaments, right? And he was saying last year at the end of Labor Cup, he was like, you're gonna see me. I'm not gonna be a ghost of the tour. Like tennis is just giving me too much. I'm gonna continue being around the tour. So it's good to see him like around and supporting all the events, but one of the things that really caught my eye just because of my recent injury was just like he was talking about not missing the tour because his knee wouldn't let him, right? And that's like
Wow.
very interesting to me because for someone who's been around the game as long as he was just like, look, there's nothing that's like kind of this is outside my control. I can't take care of like my knee's not healthy, so there's nothing I could do about it. If my knee was healthy, yeah, sure, maybe I would want to be on the tour and want to like compete and all that, right? But because I have no control over it, like I don't miss it. And it's funny because I felt very like as my schedule is very, playing tennis or basketball a couple times a week, or it's like very active, right? And like in the period of 6 or 7 months when I was like not able to play, like I didn't think about it that much because I was just
Right.
I'm injured. There's nothing I can do about it. Just like, enjoy it. And I'm kind of curious for you as someone who's had like bad knees and, shoulder problems. Do you feel like similarly when you don't like when you're like injured and like can't work out or like tennis or stuff
Yeah,
like
I
that?
think we're like humans are really adaptable. So I'm actually not surprised by both of these anecdotes that you've
Yeah.
mentioned because you'll probably miss it for a week, week and a half,
Yeah.
and then you just adjust. You learn how to
Yeah.
fill the time in with other
Definitely.
hobbies and activities and things. So I'm not surprised that he said that. Also, I think he just milked everything that he could out of the game, right? It's just, I mean,
Yeah.
no doubt one of the greatest players of all time. There was nothing left for him to prove. He totally
Yeah.
changed the game. Um, I think it's great for him to, same with Kobe. I think same with Rafa pretty soon, right? I don't think maybe he plays another French, but I don't think there's very much left for him to prove.
Yeah.
Um, and at that point, yeah, I think you probably already started thinking about the next chapter a little bit too.
Definitely.
And I'm certain that he's working on other projects that are taking a lot of his time. But yeah, you just move forward.
You say that like Rafa, like I've been seeing like a lot of sniping from Rafa's corner
Really?
towards Novak. Yeah, I've been seeing. Have you seen like these interviews of like Rafa basically saying like, yeah, I think if Novak hadn't reached the peaks that he had or held as many Grand Slams as he had, it would eat at him more than it would like eat at me or like Roger or something like that, right? And like
Interesting.
he's just been
That's
saying a
a
lot
weird
of
one.
yeah, that's a weird. It's like stuff like that and stuff saying like him saying like, oh, I have no friends on the tour anymore. Like I'm not friends with Novak. Like or I talk to Roger every now and then. It's just like little things that I've been seeing that make me. I mean, to be fair, it's not like he's voluntarily giving this
Right.
information up. People are asking him questions. He's giving them honestly what he thought, and obviously seeing Rafa the way we have over the years. Like I don't think he's a malicious person by any
Right.
mean, but
I
it
think there's
was
a language barrier sometimes too.
yeah, that could also play into it as well. But yeah, I was just a little like surprised to see that because I mean, obviously we've seen him say nothing but complimentary things and applaud when his losers leave the court. Like he's been nothing but great, right? And so it was a
Right.
little weird to see those types of responses.
Yeah, to be honest, and talking about moving forward, I've like totally kind of forgot about Rafa
Yeah,
the last part of this year, right? The same
yeah,
way I think we were really sad about Roger leaving the game at the end of Laver Cup. But again, everything just keeps moving forward. Time is pretty
yeah,
ruthless and it's
yep,
passing.
yep,
Um, so what I'm seeing here is Rafa says he's feeling better, but isn't setting any deadlines. So Aussie Open's probably still in doubt. I think he's got, I mean, I don't know what you think, but maybe one more French Open.
yeah. I mean, yeah. I don't think he's got very many tournaments as like I'm sure he wants to play a full season. I don't know if he's gonna take like another year off, but yeah,
Coming back
well,
at 38 would be
coming
pretty
back at
interesting.
yeah, exactly after like a year and 2 years of playing. But I mean, as we all do, as like all these guys do, right? Like they want to go out on their own terms. They don't want to like
Right.
have those like limitations when they given everything to the game. So
I
I
will say this, Rafa, if you're listening, we will host you for Fairfield next year.
oh yeah.
If you need to make a comeback, like feel free to stay over with us.
Can you imagine like him just like we were surprised at how many people showed up to the Fairfield Challenger, like maybe like probably 100, 150 people on the finals day. Can you imagine how many people would show up if they knew like he was playing on the I legit think the entire like community college would just be swarmed. Like there'd be like easily there like
There would be traffic jams. I mean, 680
yeah.
is already a nightmare.
Yeah.
I think that would actually like stop the Bay Area for a little
Yeah.
bit,
100%.
especially with those free admissions. They might
Yeah,
have to
no.
bump that number up.
Yeah, free admissions plus, yeah. Um, cool. That was just like a little thing that caught my eye. Cool. Maybe closing out on the last couple segments. You want to talk about Turin?
Yeah, it's a spicy race to the finish right here. I think we've got maybe a couple weeks left until rankings are pretty solidified for the top
Yeah.
eight.
Yep.
Holgaroon has been injured. He's been moving down the rankings. Uh, Rublev is now top five. I think he is pretty much cemented.
Yeah. I think
Tsitsipas is
he's good.
another guy who's been moving down. I mean, basically the theme that I'm seeing is like the guys who are kind of at the bottom of the top eight are at most risk
Yeah.
from the guys who are probably between 8 and 15. I
Yeah.
mean, we've seen Zverev make a final push.
Yep.
Hubie's making a final push. Tommy Paul's right there. D Minor's right there. I think Tiafo doesn't really have a shot the way he's playing, but Kachanov is like come back from injury and like suddenly making a push. Grigor's moved up 3 spots. So I think those are probably maybe we can start there. Who do you think is where do you think the line of who's in contention is? Because I think where I'm seeing it is probably between Grigor and Felix. And I know there's a mathematical answer to this too, but
Yeah.
I don't think Felix, Cameron, Nori, or Ben Shelton, for example, have a chance. But I think maybe if Grigor makes a crazy push, are there enough points on the table for him to get to? I don't think so. He
I
needs
mean, I think
1,500 points.
I think he legit has to win Paris and
Hmm.
win the next like couple in order to do that, right? Because he's
Wow.
so I mean, there's like he's what almost 14 1200 he's 1,200 points away from that eighth spot, right? And so he pretty
I'm seeing more than that. I'm seeing he's at 21.95 and Casper Ruud's
oh
at
interesting
36.85. So
oh interesting. I was looking at the ATP Pepperstone rankings, but it's possible. Okay, because the live points for the ATP have Grigor at 1970 right now and
interesting.
Holger at 3,110.
Got it. Got it. I may be looking
Um,
at the last week archived.
Interesting. Look, I'm just assuming based on if the ATP one is like the most accurate, I would honestly say like the cutoff is gonna be like, dude, I think the cutoff would even be Hurkacz at 27.75
Wow.
because so right, like, let's go through them, right? Like Novak at one, Carlos at two, Daniel at three, Yannick at four, Andre at five,
I think those are the
Tsitsipas.
locks for me.
Yeah, yeah. And then Tsitsipas at six at 3,705 points, Zverev with 3,400 points, and then Holger with 3,110. And then Taylor at 2,965. So I actually think the first five are going to continue to be at that top five spot. I think Tsitsipas will make it. I think Zverev will make it. I actually am going to say,
Really
yeah,
interesting.
I think Zverev will hold on to that seventh spot. I think the person who will take over that eighth and final spot is actually going to be Hurkacz because,
Wow.
yeah, I think he's going to like, I think after Shanghai, him just like chilling for the next month and doing well in Paris. Like to me, out of Holger, Taylor, Casper, and Hurkacz, I think he has the most potential to like win. I mean, basically, we're saying who has the potential to go like deepest
Yep.
in Paris, right? Like that's going to be the best tournament to do that. And
Right. But it's
Taylor,
also
yeah,
dependent on how many points you have from last year that you're
that's
defending,
true.
right? So
Yeah, that's true. That's
who has
true.
the chance of making the most incremental points? It's tough to say. The reality is there are only 1250 or 1750 points literally on the table,
Table.
including
Yeah.
Basel, roll Paris, and one of the two 250s before Nito.
Yeah, definitely. And the reason if I remember correctly, Taylor qualified last year, right? Which means that he probably has like a lot of points to defend going into this, like going towards the end of the year. Given the fact that he just lost to Mochizuki in Japan, and given the fact that Casper and Holger are, struggling in general, I that's why I kind of lean Hurkacz. But who knows? I mean, Tommy's had a good year too, so maybe he squeaks in.
Yeah, I think there's a difference between kind of who maybe deserves to make it and who's going to
Yeah,
make it,
yeah,
right? Because there are definitely some people who are trending up at the end of the year very clearly, and others who are trending down. Like I would say Francis has not been playing too hot.
yeah.
Obviously, Casper, Rune, and Tsitsipas haven't been playing too hot, but they might just have enough points to qualify.
To qualify, do you think Zverev and Tsitsipas won't make it?
I think Zverev's actually looking pretty good.
Yeah,
Um, and he's at 9 on my rankings, but I think he might, the live rankings might be a little bit different from what I'm
different.
looking at.
Yeah,
Um, I can see something pretty similar to what you just voiced
cool.
in terms of the last four spots. My only concern is I think we might have an injury, so I think maybe top 9 might be safe because I do
Safe. Yeah,
think Rune has been looking a little sketch, and
sketch. Yeah,
there's always a potential for a freak incident too.
definitely. You know what's funny? I'm looking at this like list and that the ATP has, and I'm like, it shows the age next to this. Just look at this. Novak at 36. Other than that, 20, 27, 22, 25,
Wow.
25, 26, 20, 25, 24, 26, 26, 24, 27, 25. The top 15 players, they're not even late 20s. They're like mid to early 20s. That's
Yeah,
ridiculous.
that's good news for the game, right? We've got a lot
Yeah.
of good years left with these guys, and with players like Mochizuki-san coming up too.
Yeah.
It's like you never
Yeah.
know what can happen, man.
No,
But it's
absolutely.
funny that Grigor is the next oldest guy at 32 at
32.
rank 16.
Yeah, that's why. And 32 is like, I mean, that's not really old by any stretch of the
Right.
imagination, especially with the way things that guys take care of their bodies and stuff. Like he's still in like he's I mean, he's had a really good year this year. Like this is almost like you could argue that he's still in his prime, right, athletically.
What's
And
even funnier though is Manarino at rank 24, but he's 35.
35,
That's
yeah.
crazy.
Yeah. No, I saw that too. That's There's so many guys, but I mean, as we're seeing, just like looking through these top 50 rankings, like most of the guys, it's such a like young sport,
Yep, there are only
which
four
is
guys actually who are 35 or above.
Yeah.
Bautista Agut, Wawrinka,
Yep.
Manarino, and Djokovic.
Yep. The dogs. The absolute dogs. Cool. Anything on Turin? Anything left on Turin?
Uh, no, but I think one last segment might be who are the guys outside the top 50 that we think have a chance, or maybe not top 50, but who are the
Yeah.
long shot winners that have the most potential upside in their game to potentially win a slam?
Yeah, this is one I was thinking about because I was reading a Reddit question on NBA of like who's the outside contender to win MVP at some point in their life, right? And I think the spirit of the question is more who's got the game, who's like a really good player, and like basically has that like type of ability to get there at some point beyond the guys that you hear about, right? And I think that was a really good question for similar like for tennis in general. And I think my guy for I think there's two. For me, Alexander Bublik, and I think the reason why I say that is because in order to win, when we think about like constructing players that are going to be successful, it comes down to having weapons, having movement, and having a good serve. This is a guy who has all three of that. He's 6'6" with an absolute cannon of a serve. He's an extremely good mover at 6'6", and he's got really good ground strokes. He's got a good forehand. He's got a good backhand. Unfortunately, his mental is not all he doesn't give. He's not going to be like Rafa and just competing like every single point, right? But he has put together stretches of really good weeks as we've seen in the grass, and he's in the finals right now. Right. So that's a guy who I had on my list. And the second guy who's injured, who I've spoken at length about in privately, is Jensen Brooksby.
Wow. Two 180-degree different
Two
players.
completely 180. And I know like to your point, as what we've talked about, there's a limit unless you're Djokovic. There's an upside to your talent, your ability if are a counterpuncher level player, right? But I think that for a guy who's as young as he is, who has achieved so much, like who's already like had really good results, um, it once he gets back from injury, I'm like he had I think he has a chance because we saw even in like the U.S. Open against Djokovic, right? Like he pushed Djokovic, he won that first set, made it really tough on him, and I think if he can do that to Novak, he can do that to the rest of the tour. So those are my two long shots to win a Grand Slam.
I think Bublik in particular is a really good pick. I can't think of
Yeah,
anyone else outside between, let's say, 30, ranked 35 and 100 that has a
yeah,
better chance than him. A
yeah,
couple of guys who kind of stick out. Um, I think there are a few guys like we've mentioned that are new, that are young, that could develop the game. Hijikata is really nasty. Watanuki's really nasty. Some of the Chinese players, Xi Jinping, is really
yeah,
nasty. Um, Arthur Rinderknech is a guy who I feel goes a little under the radar. I would
yeah,
be pretty scared to play a guy like that on a grass court or an indoor court. I mean,
yeah,
he just absolutely demolishes the ball with serve and volley.
yeah.
Um, Jack Draper, we've talked about, obviously has the weapons, similar, let's say, variety to Felix, where,
Felix, yeah,
I think he does have to go back to the drawing board a little bit, but he's only 21. So I do think there's plenty of upside there. Then there are the guys who are really experienced that are more on the downhill, like Wawrinka, Dominic
yeah.
Thiem. But 7 matches, 7 5-setters, man. Tennis is different from basketball, in my opinion, where,
Yeah,
it's just there are a couple of guys who have the sport locked up.
yeah.
Talent wise, I would actually throw Botic in the mix too. Um,
Interesting.
yeah, I do think
Very
he has a
interesting.
lot of talent. I put him in a similar category as what we've just said, like Hubert and Casper in terms of like that killer instinct. Would you be scared to be across the net from this guy? I'm
Yeah.
not 100% sure, but
To me, it's his forehand, man. Like his forehand he's got a very like funky grip and a really weird take back, and it's like his backhand is like ridiculous, and is like, he's got a good all around game. But I think that forehand, there's like a limit to how good you can be with that.
that's fair. Yeah. I mean, these are definitely long, long shots
Long,
at
long
this
shots.
point,
Yeah,
you know.
yeah, for
Um,
sure.
it's interesting when you look through all of these guys between, 50 and 100. There are some names that are really fucking good. Karatsev, we haven't
Yeah.
mentioned. That's a guy
Yep.
who pretty damn good. Lajovic, literally they're 50 and 51.
Yeah.
Jerry is another Serbian dude. I mean, Kecmanovic, the Serbians have a bit of a mafia going
Yeah,
in the
they're
40 to 60 range,
so deep, right? Like I mean, there's so many like for a country of what 8 million, 9 million people, they produce remarkable talent in the tennis world, right? Like there's so many legends and so many great players that have made a living in the top 100. So it's remarkable.
Yeah, it's really tough to say because again, I'm reading 50 to 60 right now. We got Karatsev, Lajovic, Fucsovic, Kecmanovic, Vukic,
Yeah.
Sonego, Hanfman, Žižen, JJ, Christopher O'Connell, Jordan Thompson. I mean, dude, these are all Rusevori's right after that. Gasquet,
Yeah.
Berrettini. Jesus, dude. I mean, the game is deep,
The game is very, very deep outside of basically like the top, say 5 to maybe like 7 players, like everyone else has a chance to make a name. Yeah,
it's
no,
kind of
it's
scary, right? Like
yeah,
outside the top five, I could pretty much put anyone from 5 to 100 anywhere in the rankings, and it would
yeah.
make sense,
It would make sense.
right?
Absolutely.
I mean,
Yeah.
you got fucking Kokonakis at 68, dude. I could see him
Yeah.
being a top 30 player,
Yeah, well, absolutely. Right. You can see him being, I mean, Zhizhen Zhang at 54. I mean, 6'4" guy with a massive forehand, massive serve. Like, come on. Like you could put him in the top 10. It would make sense to me. But this also just goes to show like something we've talked about, right? Like just the viewership of the game. Like you put the casual fan, you put like a challenger player, a guy who's top 300 and a top 100 player playing against each other. They're not going to know the difference. And like it'll make for an exciting like match no matter what. Right. And so, more to come, more to come. So we'll be following the rankings closely as we lead into Turin, which is dope. But want
yeah.
to close
Could I?
off with yeah,
Yeah, I just wanted to make one more comment. I will have to analyze this a little bit more closely, but it does seem to be that countries move in packs in the
yeah,
rankings. I'm very surprised just visually looking at the groupings of flags right now.
yeah.
And what's fascinating is like the French have a bit of a stronghold in like the 80 to 100 range with Gaston, Lestian, Benjamin Bonzi,
Yeah,
Quentin Hallis, Alexander Muller, Arthur Rinderknecht. That's like literally 80 to 100. You got like five,
yeah.
six guys. And then you move to the next level and you see a bit of like a Serbian mafia with some of the guys we've mentioned. And then you start seeing the Aussies move together with Max Purcell and or Alexei Papirin, or how do you
Popperin,
pronounce his name?
yeah,
Popperin.
Popperin, yeah,
And then you start seeing the Americans kind of in that 10 to 30 range.
yep.
So it's fascinating how everyone kind of moves the countries move together and that I guess or what's the phrase? Iron
Iron
sharpens
sharpens
iron.
iron. Yeah, no, for sure, right? And it's something like the American guys have talked about, right? Like Tiafoe made the semifinals of the US Open. That motivated like the other guys. Tommy's made the semifinals of the Australian Open. And now like all the other guys like enjoy seeing like their countrymen's success, but also motivates them to like push further because it's like, okay, I'm practicing with these guys so much. Like I can also make deep runs, right? Like Eubanks in the quarters of Wimbledon. So these guys are like working with each other and giving each other like the motivation to continue to push forward. So it's
Yeah.
good to see, especially with all these countries.
Yeah, and this is last aside here is this is where Davis Cup or some type of country team format
Yeah,
just needs to be capitalized on because,
yeah,
I mean, one country that I don't think gets the attention they deserve is Russia, right? With Medvedev
oh
and
yeah,
Rublev and Kachanov in the top 12, 13 guys pretty much.
yep,
Top eight if
yeah,
Kachanov was healthy. I
yeah.
mean, it would be so fascinating to see a nice team format between some of these top countries actually get some attention.
No, for sure. And as you were saying that, I'm literally reminded of like, I mean, Italy too, right? We got
Yep.
Yannick, we got Berrettini, we got Sonego, we got Arnaldi. That's like four guys who are basically in the top,
And
like
Musetti as much
Musetti,
as
right? Exactly, yeah. That's like five guys basically in the top like 75 who are, have each one of them has had like a big result in the past like year and a half, right? And so yeah, there's so many countries. We're still looking for an Indian player on the map, but we'll
it'll happen.
it'll happen. We'll make sure of it. Cool. Maybe we close it out with the cap of the week or thing we saw of the week.
You can start.
So Patrick Mouratoglou, who's one of the more
Oh,
polarizing figures in tennis, has announced that he will be giving lessons for 7,500. That's a lot of money. That's quite a lot of money. And this honestly, the first thing that came to my mind was like the blueprint episode, right? Where we've talked about, there's no like magic formula for success. It comes down to like maximizing, like it comes down to hard work, which means like working systematically on a framework that is designed to like lead you to success, right? And people who have been there, sure, they might help you identify things that maybe you can't see yourself, but there's like a framework that you can work on that will get you like 90% or like almost all the way there, right? And so to me, it was just like kind of blasphemous to charge that amount. I think that's like absolutely ridiculous. But I'll let you take this over because I know this is quite a polarizing thought for you.
look, man, money is hard to come by,
Yeah,
and I'm not one to spend money, especially $7,500 in 60 minutes
yeah,
or even 90 minutes. Like, even if I had 90 minutes straight of epiphanies, literally every 10 seconds, I'm getting an epiphany from this guy. That's
yeah,
not worth $7,500.
yeah,
Like you said, tennis is a game where you need a couple concepts and then you just got to work on them and get the
yeah,
reps in, right?
yep,
And I think there's an over focus on technique and things like that, which actually don't matter as much, which private coaches kind of pride themselves on.
yep,
So, in my opinion, there's absolutely that to me, beyond $150 if you're extremely wealthy, and that too, like maybe if you do that one time, that's like, I mean, you're going down the wrong approach, in my opinion. You're
yeah.
trying to look for band-aids, you're trying to look for someone to give you a magic potion. Like you need to figure out everything else, right? So yes, a couple of those sessions in different domains could be very valuable where, you spend 150 on a maybe on a physical therapist, you get a program for yourself. Maybe you spend 150 on a private lesson, get a total tune up, and you video record that lesson and really take notes on it and work on everything that that coach tells you for the next year before coming back. Um, those are the types of things that I would invest in. But
Yeah.
beyond that, there's absolutely no incremental value.
So that you like I agree with everything you said, and I think like that we can close it off on this. What's the absolute minimum you would pay for a what that you would have paid for a Patrick lesson when we were like 14 or 16?
You mean maximum?
Yeah, absolute maximum. Sorry, yeah.
Um, I think that 150 range is that's the top end for me, to be honest
That's
with you.
that's extremely interesting because to me it was 75. I think I have a hard time like dude, a dollar per minute more than a dollar. Come on. I can't justify that. There's no way
And
I
I
can
think
do that.
that's pretty fair. Honestly, it's kind of regional too, right? I think we've
Yeah.
been in the Bay Area. There are a lot of guys who charge 120, so I think that's where I got the 150 number
150.
from.
Yeah.
I remember Jessup, Fustar, all of
Yeah.
those guys charge exorbitant fees.
Yeah.
Because they're I mean, part of their job is to it's kind of like what we've discussed with a bunch of issues more broadly with capitalism is you want to create a problem that isn't there and then be the person to solve it.
Solve it. Yeah.
So, I think that's the hook for a lot of these coaches is they want you to believe that you need them.
Yeah.
When really the approach should be, and honestly, a lot of the best players we saw in NorCal were guys who took lessons once a quarter, basically.
Yeah.
They would get a tune up and
Yeah.
then they would be applying that in matches for the next 1 to 2 to 3 months, and then they would come back and maybe work on something else
Yep. Yeah.
and get an
Absolutely.
overhaul.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, it like Vasil was talking about, right? It definitely helps when you have parents who have been around the game and been, coaches for an extended period of time. because you don't need to go to anyone else, right? But there's a lot of people who are new and aren't like us and haven't been around the game their entire life, right? And so that's the challenging part. But people on Twitter were roasting him and shitting on him. I saw like Karu, like Carousel, like my tennis HQ, right? He was like, yeah, that's an absolute joke. Like the guy never played at any level, so I'm not gonna 7,500 is absolutely ridiculous. And I mean, Carew is well within his right to say that because, as you see on YouTube, like that guy's like a stud. So, yeah, it was a good
Yeah, I mean,
response.
Patrick just likes to hear himself talk. I think that's his claim to fame.
Yeah, 100%. Anything else on your mind before we close out?
That's all.
Cool. That's a wrap on episode 13. We got some good guests that we're working towards to try and get on. So you'll hear from us and from them soon. But until then, peace.
Peace.